Video time. I'm back. Doing something a little different today. Let's see if I can change this. There we go. I was doing some research, writing another book. It's tentatively called Ariadne, and it's about the crossing polycrisis of AI overthrow of humanity and global heating. Two topics I've been covering on here. And because I've been covering both of those topics on here, the YouTube algorithm actually suggested that I do a video on those two. Since it's in the book, since this topic is in the book, I thought I would do that. So here we are. I actually have a script, probably notes for inclusion in the book at some point, and this is the first for me, actually having a script. I will be showing you the script on the screen, and you can follow along if you want to. The topic today is, let's do a screen share. Oh yeah, I'll mention my book. My first novel was 100 Days, an End of Civilization novel. Available, well, the link in the description, available on Amazon, desktop publishing, self-published. Did it myself, including the cover. I like how it turned out. And I will probably publish the second book there also. They don't really overlap. There's no character continuity or anything else. Just the topics are fairly similar. And I'm thinking about doing a Kickstarter on this with perks and deluxe editions and things like that. So if you think that's a good idea or something you might want to participate in, there's apparently a surprising number of people who do like to participate in Kickstarters about novels. Let me know if you think there's any good idea to be doing that. So that out of the way, let's do not that, this. All right. This was the script I wrote. I don't know how many pages it is. I'll put it up here because I'm going to have to read it. And also, I have other little things I'm going to pop in here at different times. So the topic is, what are people going to do with global heating? I've said many times that most people will simply not thrive on a planet that is subject to global heating. But the wealthy and the elites and the people maybe who plan ahead, and you know how it is, they might have some ideas about basically escaping from global heating. So yeah, why not? How would you do that? Where would you do that? A couple of things that people need to know. I'm going to switch to another thingamajig. What people kind of need to understand, this is a map of the Earth, the North Pole is at the top, is that most of the land mass on Earth is actually in the north. I know that there's North America and there's South America, but a lot of the equator is actually in the middle. So even parts of Africa are technically in the northern hemisphere. Also, a lot of the all of Asia and South Asia basically is in the northern hemisphere, and so there's a second thing that this points out, which is that most people, especially of course the developed West, the first world, live in the north. So when global heating starts to impact the Earth, it's going to impact these places rather severely. It's already happening. The weather weirding, the weather wilding that we're seeing, the record-breaking heat, the record-breaking cold, all that kind of stuff is all evidence of what's happening to us. And I've said on here many times that in the last few months that I think that the Earth system, which drives our weather, basically our habitable zones and our agriculture zones and everything else, the Earth system is breaking down. I don't know that there's any hope for it, to be honest. We can check that real quick. Since I've been talking about the Earth system a lot on here, let's do a quick update. Let's go to the top of the atmosphere and look at the wind patterns. This is the polar vortex. It's never looked like this. This is wrong, people. There's 3 subvortices here, and the main one in the middle isn't anywhere near the North Pole. This is chaotic. This is simple chaos. The Earth dynamic system is now in a chaotic mode, and I don't know when this ever fixes itself, to be honest. This has been going on for 3 months, and whatever this means for us, that's what we're going to get. It's as simple as that. This is taking us somewhere, and I have profound misgivings about where this is going. Back to the topic. So it's going to affect people in the northern hemisphere, people in the southern hemisphere, but most of the people and most of the money is in the north. So the people in the northern hemisphere are already asking themselves, at least the wealthy ones, the ones who accept the science, the ones who read the scientific papers, are asking themselves, so what are we going to do? Where am I going to go? How am I going to get out of this mess? And there has been a surprising lot of talk about this. Mark Zuckerberg and other elites, for example, already have property on Hawaii, which is an island chain. Others have moved to New Zealand. Hawaii is in the northern hemisphere. New Zealand is in the southern hemisphere. There is some preference for islands. New Zealand is certainly an island, so is Hawaii, because they provide some physical isolation, right? Fortress islands, you can think of them that way. They are isolated from the masses, so people can't simply walk into your island fortress. They're going to have an airplane, they're going to have a boat or something like that, and the further you are from land, here's Hawaii, and here in the middle, you see it's a long ways from anywhere. And New Zealand, while it's close to Australia, Australia and New Zealand together are a long way from anywhere, really, if it really comes down to it. So I'm doing this video and this article on the idea of escaping south. Just south because it's not the north. South because there's fewer people. South because there's less land. You have fewer people around you after you escape south. So there might be a general flight to the southern hemisphere, a general desire to escape to the south. And this kind of thing has happened before. For example, Argentina has been a favorite hideaway for people in Europe who are trying to escape the law. South Africa was a colony of the Dutch, in particular the Dutch East India Company. So they were down there in the south of Africa doing European things. That's not unusual for them to be doing that. And then, of course, there's Australia and New Zealand, which were basically colonies of the British Empire at one time, and we like to think of them as still dominated by Europeans, the English in particular. So there's already been a lot of movement and a lot of domination in the South. And so I'm going to focus on what it's going to be like, how it's going to work out to escape to the 4 places I just mentioned. Being in the South, being land masses that would be attractive, being places that Europeans have already found attractive, being Argentina, South Africa, skipping Madagascar, Australia, and New Zealand. Now, there is something else in the south, and it's worth mentioning, and that's Antarctica. Antarctica is a continent. It is mostly below sea level, believe it or not. It has mountain ranges and things like that, but the weight of the ice has actually put the dirt part of it, the earth part of the continent, on below sea level. So it's not obvious how useful it would be as a continent. However, as an ice sheet, as an ice mass, you could do something down there. And again, that's about as isolated as you can get. Why would you be down there? Well, you're escaping global heating. It's interesting enough that I might actually even do a separate video on what would it be like to escape global heating by going to Antarctica. But back to the topic. I'll meld that in as I see fit. So again, I'm going to read from most of this. You can read along if you want. If anybody's interested in having this document, leave a comment. I have an email address. I don't think it's in the description for this, but you can also email me, send me your email address at my Gmail account, and I'll put that in the description. It's not in there right now as I'm doing this, but I'll put it in the description, and then you can email me at my alternate email address, and we can have a communication, and you can have this document. I'm fine with sharing it. So let's just go through this. There are 3 parts, and each part has about 3 parts, but most of the actual information is in the first 2 parts, and the last one is just something of a summary beyond temperature, the societal strain. So let's get started on this, shall we? The illusion of distance, saving ourselves in a warming world. Basically escaping. If you think that most of the problems are going to be in the Northern Hemisphere, places like the U.S., Europe, the Middle East, the Near East, the Southeast, maybe China, if you're worried about wars coming about because of refugee crises or food availability problems or whatever, you might just want to escape all that. Elon Musk is pretty keen to go to Mars. He's building his own rockets. He talks about going to Mars all the time. He has his reasons, his public, he's presented his reasons in public for doing that. I think he's trying to escape global heating. I think he knows exactly what's coming. I know exactly what's coming. His answer is to try to get to Mars, where he can not be approachable unless you've got he called it his BFG. Before he started calling it Starship, he called it his BFG. And the BFG was big fucking rocket. BFR, big fucking rocket, okay? So unless you have a BFR, you're not going to get to Mars. And he's the only one with a BFR. So he gets the place to himself, right? And that will be the idea. And that's the idea of these alternatives, which I'm going to present here. So people want to run and hide from global heating, but the question is where? And, you might run and hide to simply a different part of the country you're in. You might go live in the country. You might abandon the city and go live in the country. You might think that's a safer place to be. But if you're worried that your country is going to fail completely, like the UK already doesn't provide all of its food internally. They have farming and they have livestock and a bunch of other things, but they have more people than they have arable land. So in the UK, they import a lot of their food. I think it's like 60% is imported. That's fine. That works out fine, unless there's a global food crisis, in which case the people of the UK might find themselves not getting as much as they want, or maybe nothing at all. Where do they get their food from? If they're getting their food from countries that are having a food crisis, then maybe there's export bans on food. And so if you live in the UK, you might have a problem simply because you even on the best of days, you don't produce enough food for the population of the UK. So if someone was living in the UK and they knew that, and they knew there might be problems with just the food supply, I'm just picking one, okay, just picking one thing that might apply to other countries as well, but just picking the one thing that applies to the UK. Being on an island nation in the north might be a liability because you can't invent more arable land. You're stuck with what you've got. And if your population is too big, and this could apply in France, Germany, Norway, right, Denmark, the US even, you might have to reconsider where you are. And if you've got money, then reconsidering where you are is a thing you can do. You can actually think about that. But where? One immediate thought is to escape south. A northern escape, for example, from the US to Canada, or from Germany into Scandinavia, or France into Scandinavia, or escaping into Russia, or escaping into China. Okay, these are large nations that are more in the north and maybe less likely to be impacted by global heating. Okay, the problem with that is that these areas are mostly undeveloped. Canada, for example, is mostly forest. Russia is forest, tundra, and permafrost. They're undeveloped. If you go to these places, you find that there's few towns, they're far apart, they're small, there are few roads. Again, there's forests, there's landscape that's hard to make roads on. It's cold, it's freezing all the time. Nobody wants to live there currently. Maybe in 10 years, 20 years that changes, but right now it makes no sense to develop these areas because no one would want to live there anyway. Also, just to pick Russia and China, these are unfriendly or authoritarian regimes. Will they let you in? And the U.S. is kind of becoming an authoritarian regime. Will they let you in? Now, Donald Trump will sell you a $5 million gold card visa. So, again, if you're an elite and you've got the money and you can buy the gold card from Donald Trump, of course, he'll put the money in his pocket. But it doesn't matter. he can then let you in, and he can tell all the Gestapo police he's got around him not to bother this person. And if they do bother you, you whip out your gold card, right? Okay, right here, signed by Donald Trump. So you might be able to get into these places. They might take you in. They might treat you well, but maybe not. So escaping to the north is going to be somewhat problematic. Also, you're still on continents that are going to have problems with global heating. There's problems right now in France. There's problems right now in the Mediterranean countries. The lower 48 U.S. states are having big problems. This is only going to get worse. So if you live in the lower 48 states, say you live in Florida, and you want to escape north to get away from the heat in Florida, then you might end up in part of Canada. But eventually, if there's enough people in the lower 48 states who have the same idea, you might find yourself surrounded by people who are also escaping. But now they're angry, and maybe they're broke, and maybe they're homeless, and they find out that you have money or whatever. You should take me in. You're an American like I am, and here you are in Canada. Here you are in Russia. Here you are in China. You have to take me in. So for the rich elites to escape to the north isn't really escaping to the degree they may want to. And so you may not escape to the north. It's undeveloped. Not all the regimes are friendly. Some of them are authoritarian or becoming more so. So instead, you might escape to the south. We never talk about the south. Most people don't know there is a southern hemisphere. Couldn't name the countries that are in it. So that's not bad, right? If you're an elite, you got money. Escaping to the south almost sounds like escaping to Mars. And for most people in the world, it would be, because this is southern hemisphere. It's hard to get down there. It's hard to even know that you can get down there. It's hard to even know what's down there. It may as well be Mars. So Elon Musk and his BFR, and he's going to go to Mars. Maybe he could just go to Argentina or South Africa. In fact, Elon Musk is from South Africa. They have a very powerful link to the British Empire and the Dutch East India Company. So Europe. These may be really friendly places to escape to. You don't have to escape to Mars. You can escape to South Africa. You can escape to Australia. And it's far enough away, it's easy enough to do, and you don't have to bring your own atmosphere or your own water, okay? Now, I'm going to mention Antarctica. Antarctica is not really an answer, though in the past it was green. This planet was much hotter than it is now. Oh, well, then what's the problem? Global heating. Okay, it was hotter when there was dinosaurs, all right? We weren't here. There were no croplands. There was no wheat harvest. There was no enormous coastal cities, right? It was dinosaur times. And okay, so this planet has been hotter before, and Iceland. I did it twice. Antarctica, because I'm thinking about Greenland and Iceland a lot these days. Antarctica was green. There's actually petrified forests in Antarctica, the last vestiges of forests that were there 20 million years ago. It's like living on Mars. The landscape is frozen, just like the Martian landscape is frozen, but there's abundant water. It's ice. You'd be living on ice. Now, on Mars, you can't find water, but in Antarctica, you'd have plenty. You'd also have a breathable atmosphere. Now, it's cold, but it's breathable. So with a little application of technology, maybe you could figure it out. And you're still connected to Earth. You're on Earth. Now, you may have to change the environment down there. Domed cities, portable cities that can be dragged around on the ice, these, habitats, whatever you want to call them. But you're still on Earth. So if you need materials, doctors, if someone needs to leave your domed city in Antarctica and go back to Europe for surgery or something, then you could simply do that. You wouldn't have to have a BFR. All right, because you're not on Mars. And for the people willing to live on Mars or think about that, Antarctica might actually be an attractive alternative. You don't need a BFR. Well, you could still use your BFR because you could launch in Texas, have all these supplies, and land in Antarctica 30 minutes later. Unload the supplies, launch from Antarctica, go back to Texas and load up again. That's how the BFR works. That's how the Starship works. It's reusable. And you can use it as a truck. And instead of a cargo plane, you could use the Starship, SpaceX's Starship, as a truck, and they have talked about doing that. And if they were to do that, they would do this to Antarctica. They would have launch facilities, and they would just use the BFR as a cargo rocket, closer than Mars. Most land is in the north. That's what I started out saying. The southern hemisphere means, and I'm kind of picking four at random here. Not at random. They're just my evaluated best choices. Someone else may think differently, and that's fine. I'm picking for the south: New Zealand, Australia, Argentina, and South Africa. The population of New Zealand is currently 5 million. Australia is closer to 27 million. Argentina, 67 million. A lot of people down there. And South Africa is 63 million. All four of these have really diverse populations. There's a lot of Europeans, a lot of Americans, a lot of Mediterranean peoples, so Greece, France, Africa, and of course the indigenous peoples, the Argentines, for example, the black people of Africa are living in South Africa, and there are native peoples in Australia too, and also New Zealand. But the populations are also highly integrated with non-natives. So these would be popular places for people to escape to. They already have large expatriate European, English, American populations. So they are ready to be retaken or further colonized. Now, if we add up the numbers for these populations for these countries, we get 162 million people in these four locations. Now, that's about 2.5% of the current global population. So while there are a lot of people living here, I mean 67 million people living in Argentina, that's a lot of people. It's still only a little over 2% of the global population. That would be about, the 162 million is about the population of any of Bangladesh, Russia, or Ethiopia. And in fact, I think Russia and Ethiopia are under 162 million. Russia is about 140 million, and Ethiopia is like 135 million. So all four of these places are not heavily populated. Now, in the rest of this narrative, I'm going to assume that since these four places in the south can support 162 million people between them, that allows for 162 million people to escape there, evenly divided among the four destinations. So 162 million people for these four destinations. That's still, again, a little over 2% of the current population. But that might be a large percentage of the elites. What are the elites? Like 2% of the current population? What do they tell you? 1% of the current or 10% of the current population owns 50% of the wealth, something like that. And the lower 50% owns like 1% of the world's wealth. So 2% of the elites, though these would be the ultra elites, right? These are the multimillionaires, the billionaires, the trillionaires, like Elon Musk. 162 million of those people, not everybody, 162 million of those people could find these places attractive. Argentina, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. They're in the south. They're somewhat isolated from the problems that are going to be happening in the north. They're distant. They're hard to get to, and people wouldn't even think about them. They just wouldn't think about them. That there's elites and wealthy living in Argentina, they would never cross anyone's mind that that's a thing that's going to happen. So it's not a bad place to escape to. But if 162 million people escaped global heating in some combination of America, the UK, Europe, the Near East, the South Asia, and ended up going down there, that would double the populations of these countries if we apportioned them evenly. So doubling the population of a country is not going to be easy. These people might not be welcomed, but it's critical to remember these are the wealthiest of the wealthy escaping south. If this is the proposal I'm making here, this is the thought they are having, and I am putting numbers on this. 162 million people would double the populations of these countries, but they'd bring massive amounts of wealth with them. So if they wanted more infrastructure, water processing, desalinization, right, to create more water, if they wanted to terraform deserts and rainforests and make them hospitable to humans, they'd have the money to do that. And in the event that the industrialized North is really under the gun with global heating, then terraforming Argentina and South Africa and making it really hospitable to the elites could be a project that they would completely be okay with. And they take their billions and they take their trillions and they would go to these places and make them better for themselves and not have to go to Mars and not have to fix the problems in their own countries. They would just leave and bring their money with them. And if that were the case, then these destinations would probably welcome them. Yeah, you can come here and live so long as you bring your money with you. And you'll have to give your money to the government, and then you'll have to build your own housing, and you'll have to build your own manufacturing facilities and extend the grid and bring on more electricity, whatever it is, solar, wind, nuclear. You've got the money, you figure it out. And if you figure it out, you can live here. And everybody lives a better life. The people who were here before you, and then you on top of that, and we double the size of our country, and everybody is a millionaire. They might welcome that. Now, they might welcome that at a high level, like Donald Trump will let you into America if you give him $5 million. So, but will the American population be okay with that? If tens of millions of people start showing up, having paid $5 million apiece, and start moving around in America, buying up housing and sending their kids to elite colleges and causing inflation and everything else, will the average American be okay with that? Well, no, they won't. But if it's okay with Donald Trump and his administration, then who cares what the average American thinks? So there could be conflicts with this, and I'll get to that in a minute. So how much time do these people have to make a move, to make their jump, make their decision? This depends on the current global climate trajectory and the increasing search for sanctuary. So as things start to get rough, then these people will be competing with each other. And maybe if you get in early, you can figure this out and be okay. If you come later, then you're going to have additional problems trying to integrate because it's already been impacted. The wealthy are already talking about bunkers and private islands. Mark Zuckerberg has his private bunker island compound in Hawaii, for example. But there's others. Elon Musk is going to Mars. Jeff Bezos is going to low Earth orbit or maybe a moon base. Again, these rich men are making their own rockets. Why do you think they're doing that? Africans will likely overrun South Africa on foot. The situation in South Africa is kind of special because, once again, it's attached to a really big continent, and there's a lot of people living in Africa. I think there's over 1 billion people living in Africa. So South Africa, although it would be a destination for Europeans and other wealthy people, wealthy Arabs, wealthy Chinese, they could all go to South Africa because it has a European flavor. It would be difficult to fend off the hostile masses who are being impacted by global heating closer to the equator. They would head south also, and they could go on foot or in vehicles, in caravans and convoys. They could head south. And what happens when they get to the border of South Africa? Are you defending that border? Are you turning them away? Do you have your armies out with automatic weapons and tanks, and you're fending off the walls? I don't know. It's a different situation in South Africa, so it may not be as attractive, but it is a place that Europeans and Americans and Asians could go. South Americans might overrun Argentina. I think it's a little more isolated, so it's probably safer, but can't rule it out. Everyone else worries that their current situation is not the best. Examples for North America, which is where I'm from, Northern Hemisphere, and of course, I'm an American, so I can list a few. If you live in the Northern Hemisphere in Germany or France or Spain or India or whatever, then you might have your own list of similar problems. So, for example, here in America, the reason why you might want to leave and head south, Argentina or South Africa or wherever. Florida real estate, there's a current exodus out of Florida real estate due to hurricanes and coastal floods, which have become fairly destructive. They also have in the south of Florida, where the real estate is most expensive, they have what they call blue sky or nuisance floods. There's no storm, there's nothing going on, the streets just flood. It's because of the geography of that area. The soil is very porous, and when the sea level rises, it just comes in underground and comes up inside the communities. Half of the state of Florida could be lost to moderate sea level rise, and I don't think there's any way to defend against that. It's almost a done deal. The U.S. government is currently shutting down FEMA and parts of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and also parts of the National Weather Service. And as I've said in previous videos, you have to go back a ways. This is a tactical move on their part. They don't want people to know. It's as simple as that. FEMA is supposed to come in and help you when you've been hit by a disaster. They won't do that anymore. And because they're not doing that, no one will know there was a disaster. There's no money associated with it. There's no news cameras. There's nothing. FEMA's not coming. There's no FEMA tents. There's no rapid reaction force. You're on your own and nobody cares. U.S. government is also shutting down climate research. Do I even have to talk about it? That's just a fact. Climate research in the U.S. is being shut down. Universities are being intimidated. Pretty soon, it will probably be illegal under the Trump administration to conduct climate research. They just won't allow it. Why would they do that? Because they don't want anyone to talk about it. They don't want to have to deal with it. It's as simple as that. And therefore, people are going to be taken by surprise. And then they're going to want to run away. And that's why I'm having this topic. Here in the Bay Area, where I live, about 10 years ago, they conducted what they call a flood atlas, and people were scratching their head. Why would they be conducting a flood atlas? We're not flooding, and it's true, we're not. Well, a couple of months ago, we had some major flooding. Nuisance king tides, again, not a tropical storm, nothing, not even raining. It's just the water came up really high inside San Francisco Bay, and it flooded a lot of areas. And that's why they made a flood atlas 10 years ago, because they knew. They knew. And if you've been reading the flood atlas and you're looking at where you live and where your community is and where you're vulnerable, you might be thinking, maybe I need to get out. And where are people going to escape to? That's the question that we're examining here today. How much time, if any, does latitude, that means departure from equator, which is 0, buy us in the face of accelerating climate change? Now, this is a complicated question because we don't know when we're going to have to make these decisions. We don't know which direction to go. Do we want to go north, further north? Do we want to go south and further south? As warming proceeds, lower latitudes closer to the equator, become too hot or too wild in both the northern and the southern hemispheres. So either side of the equator, either latitudes to the north or latitudes to the south of the equator, become wild weather and too hot. And these populations will suffer large-scale impacts, and they will suffer them first, and they already are. Parts of the lower U.S., so the southwest, the south, and the southeast, are truly having problems. And people are already just voting with their feet, essentially. Higher latitudes start to look more hospitable, but at what rate? So higher latitudes either in the north or in the south. So you're escaping the middle, where the heat is expected to become the biggest problem. The idea that things will be cooler at higher latitudes is already in discussion. People are already talking about, where am I going to go? They're talking about heading north in the northern hemisphere and possibly heading south in the southern hemisphere to escape the heat. Higher latitudes tend to be less developed. This is part of the appeal. So higher latitudes compared to the U.S. lower 48 states would be Canada. Oh, what a coincidence. Donald Trump is talking about annexing Canada into the United States of America. I wonder why he might be doing that. He's also talking about annexing Greenland. That's also at a higher latitude compared to the lower 48 states. Wouldn't it be really convenient if Canada was part of the U.S. and people in the U.S. could simply move to Canada as things got too hot? I don't know if that's what he's thinking, but somebody in the administration may be thinking that, because he's been talking incessantly about annexing Canada. The Canadians don't want that, but it's a lot of undeveloped land that's at higher latitudes. Now, how fast can higher latitudes in the southern hemisphere, that's mostly deserts, changed into temperate zones suitable for large numbers of humans. Remember, humans basically evolved, and we created nearly all of our civilizations at these latitudes that are fairly close to the equator, not at the equator, but just above it and just below it, because they're temperate. They're the right temperature mix. They have the 4 seasons. They have there's no real extremes of too hot or too cold, and that's where we made our line in the sand. That's where we put our stake in the ground, is in these temperate regions. The Mediterranean, right? The Fertile Crescent, Southern Europe, the southern parts of the U.S. The French came in through the Gulf of Mexico, and they took the whole southern part of what is now the United States of America. We bought it from them. We bought it from Napoleon. Mexico was colonized by the Spanish, and eventually California. So we've tended to do our work, whatever you want to call that, in these temperate zones, not too far from the equator, but far enough to not be a desert, not be real hot, not be real rainy. And as these areas in turn become uninhabitable, which they must due to global heating, we will want to just ratchet things up a little bit. So if you're in the northern hemisphere, just go a little further north. If you're in the southern hemisphere, just go a little further south, and you'll find another temperate zone. That's the idea. That's the thinking. But how fast can this happen? How fast can Canada become something like the lower 48 U.S. states? How fast can Scandinavia become more like France and Germany and the UK? How fast can Russia become more like India, the Near East, Southeast Asia, to accept these people who are going to be trying to escape global heating? How fast does that happen? And we're talking about 162 million people. Again, that number, I'm just going to stick with that number. That's the number of people we can save if we want to move them south. So let's just say we save the same number of people by moving them north. The timeline for these regions to become like the place where people are leaving could be centuries. Now, if we wanted to throw money at the problem, we could maybe in advance change some of that. Again, we're talking about the wealthy elites. They could do that. They could clear land in Canada and set up farming communities and domed cities and move themselves from wherever they currently live into Canada. Would the Canadians allow that? Probably not. But if you got a lot of money and you start throwing money around and you start buying politicians and buying the military and buying the wealthy, influential elites and already there, then maybe you can get what you want. We're talking money here. We're talking people, desperate people with a lot of money. And they may not hesitate to corrupt the politicians and break the rules, break the systems, and get new rules passed and throw out the government and, like Donald Trump, just invade and take over. That's a desperate move, to invade Canada and take it over. But that's the kind of thing we can expect from the wealthy and influential elites who are trying to escape global heating. I'm not saying that's what Trump is doing, but I'm saying that what he's doing with Canada and Greenland is exactly what I would predict would happen if the wealthy elites are trying to escape global heating. That's what they would do. That's what they would have to do. It's probably easier in the global south than it is in the north, which is why for this topic I've picked escaping to the global south. Terraforming in this sense. Okay, terraforming, you have to look it up. I didn't bother with providing a definition for it, but terraforming means make like the Earth. So you would terraform Mars, you would terraform Venus, you would terraform the moons of Jupiter, okay, but you can also terraform the places on Earth that are hostile to humans. Make them less so. Make them more like the places we like. You can terraform Canada to be more like California. How would you do that? With a lot of money, okay? Terraforming in this sense means clearing forests, building roads, building entirely new cities. If you're clearing a forest, you'll have wood, so you could use wood to build new cities. You have to probably bring in concrete and steel and everything else. But if you've made out of money, creating a new California or a new New York or a new France or a new Germany in these northern latitudes might not be a terrible project. You'd be willing to do that to save yourself. But then you'd have to, move critical infrastructure, rebuild critical manufacturing, rebuild infrastructure like electricity, water, and ports. So, you can move things around. If you're going to be using the BFR of SpaceX, you'll have to have landing and launch facilities to move huge amounts of material around, certainly international airports. You would have to reestablish agriculture areas and food processing. So these northern latitudes, like the boreal forest in Canada, the tundra in Russia, while they may be attractive in a heating world, meaning they get warmer and they're more temperate, they're still forests. So you're going to have to, there's no place to raise your crops. You're going to have to clear these trees, pull up the stumps, rebuild the soil. Normally that would be generational work. It would take hundreds of years to turn the Canadian forest into arable land that's deep enough and resilient enough. And you'd probably have to change your food production methods to not deplete the soil and not require as much fertilizer or irrigation. You may completely change how you do agriculture. All that would have to be decided. All that would have to be implemented. But again, if it's just money, that's all it is. Accomplishing all these in the southern hemisphere is certainly harder than the north, just because of distance and money. But the south area still looks better to the elites trying to escape the mess they made. They're going north to get away from global heating, but they're also going north to get away from the mess they made. It doesn't do you much good if you're living in Italy and you escape global heating and the angry mobs by going to Germany, because there's going to be angry mobs in Germany. When they see you're Italian, they're not going to like the look of you. So you're going to have maybe less of a problem escaping the angry mob by going south instead of north. And that's why I'm doing this story the way I am. Oh, again, yes, this story is research for my upcoming novel, Ariadne, where escaping global heating becomes critical. It's something of a thriller. And how people do that and how people don't do that, how they fail to do that, how they jump the wrong direction, is a big part of the plot. Because what happens when you make the wrong move, for example, you choose to move north into Russia instead of heading south into, say, South Africa. If you make the wrong move, it's the wrong move, and you don't get to make another one. So, the southern shift, possible future impacts. So these areas are going to have their own problems, right? Climate impacts for Australia and Argentina, just to pick two. We hear a lot about what's happening in Australia and increasingly even Argentina. Again, these are fully developed modern nations. They have a lot of people, a lot of media, a lot of money moving around, and we hear a lot about them. So here's just a quick bullet list. One bullet list for Australia and then another one for Argentina, because these would be prime destinations for the wealthy elites. So in Australia, land temperatures have increased by 1.5 degrees C since 1950. It's getting hotter. 9 of the 10 warmest years on record in Australia have been since 2005. So 9 of the 10 have been in the last 20 years. So it's getting hotter. Fire seasons have become significantly longer and more intense, especially in southern and eastern Australia. That's where most of the people live, in Australia. The 2019-20 Black Summer fires burned over 24 million hectares. That's 240,000 square kilometers and 93,000 square miles, and killed or displaced an estimated 3 billion animals. These were forest fires, a lot of animals. And I don't know, maybe you recall the tragic pictures coming out of Australia during that Black Summer. Rising sea levels have increased coastal erosion and inundation. Again, they're having the same problem that Florida is having now. Sea level rise, it's not a big deal. It's going to take 100 years. Well, guess what? It's already a problem. We just had some of that here in the Bay Area. We had some nuisance flooding. And we have a flood atlas. And why do we have a flood atlas? For a reason, folks. 60% decline in cool season rainfall in the southwest of Australia since 1970, and a 20% increase in wet season rainfall since 1994 in the north. So they have both things going on. They have catastrophic floods, and they have catastrophic, droughts. The Great Barrier Reef is it worth mentioning here. It's important to Australians. I don't think it's that important overall, but here we are. Rising ocean temperatures have caused 5 mass coral bleaching events in just 8 years, threatening the reef's survival. Okay, and the reef is important to tourism, and it's important to the economy in Australia. Now, if 40 million wealthy people move into Australia and bring their billions and trillions of dollars with them, then maybe it's not a big deal. But again, it's an indication that something bad is coming for Australia. Heat waves are Australia's deadliest natural hazard, killing more people than all other natural disasters combined. Folks, it has gotten hot there, really hot, and it's killing people. And Australia is a reasonably modern country, right? Insured losses from extreme weather reached approximately $2 billion in 2025 alone. Projections from the Australian Climate Service suggest annual disaster recovery costs could exceed $40 billion by 2050. They're probably sandbagging a little bit. I would say that the disaster recovery costs could probably exceed $40 billion by 2035, 10 years from now. So let's talk about Argentina. It's been hit very hard by global heating. The Atacama Desert is like a Martian landscape. Could it be terraformed? Now, this is an interesting thought. Now, the Atacama Desert is considered a natural treasure. It's one of the driest places on Earth. It has unique landscape, unique animals and plants, but it is like a Martian landscape. So if Elon Musk is willing to go to Mars and build domed cities and struggle to survive on Mars, well, he could do it cheaper and easier. Still use his BFR, all right, to move things around, but he could do it a lot easier in the Atacama Desert. Would the Argentines let him do that? Well, if he brought his trillions of dollars with him, sure they would. Argentina is experiencing 3 times the wildfires in the Patagonia region. The Patagonia region is part of this unique landscape. Patagonia is fairly famous, and even as a tourist destination, and they are seeing 3 times the number of wildfires in Patagonia in recent years. Recent heat waves have been judged to be 60 times more likely due to global heating. So someone's on it. Someone understands what's happening down there. Drought-related losses to agriculture amount to 4% of GDP by 2050. Again, probably by 2040 or 2035. All these numbers are sandbagged. It's going to be a lot worse than you think sooner. In the Andes and Patagonia, precipitation has decreased by up to 50% since the mid-20th century, leading to reduced river flows and impacting hydroelectric energy production. So if you thought you were going to live in Argentina and use their abundant hydropower to run your civilization, excuse me, even as you double the population of the place, forget it. You're going to have much more expensive solutions. Lots of solar, lots of wind, if they have wind, and probably nuclear. It's going to cost a lot of money. Will people do it? If they have to, then I guess they will. Again, they're escaping. What are you willing to do to survive? And on top of all this, Argentina has a recent history of climate change denial, and it's worth saying. It's kind of funny that they may be accepting double their current population in climate refugees, and yet they are in climate change denial. You know, a couple $1 billion injected into the Argentine political subculture would cure that, I'm sure. But it is interesting that they are in denial about global heating. Let's talk a little bit about the Earth dynamic system itself. It's not going to be friendly to these places. Again, these are the 4 places in the south that people may want to escape to because of their attractiveness. Argentina, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. They're going to have their own set of problems related to climate change. And escaping to these 4 places that I'm indicating here, even though it may seem attractive and it may even seem unavoidable, there are going to be problems associated with the very thing you're trying to escape, global heating. So there's the big kahuna down there. The big monster is called the Antarctic Circumpolar Current. It goes around the Antarctic continent, and it influences the weather down there because these places are all very far to the south. They are in the ACC. Shifts in the Arctic circumpolar current are fundamentally altering the climate, ecosystems, and economies of southern hemisphere nations. Driven by strengthening westerly winds and melting ice, these shifts redistribute heat across the globe. And these countries, the four I've been targeting here, are in it. Okay, so this is important to them. ACC shifts poleward to the south bring warm water into closer contact with ice shelves, leading to sea level rise and increased storm surge in southern hemisphere nations. So as the ice melts, the first place it's going to flood is the southern hemisphere. It takes a while for melt water to move around the seven seas. So for a while, it's going to be in the south, and it's going to flood these countries and give them problems with storm surges and everything else. Recent slowing or shifting of these currents disrupts the global conveyor belt. Includes the AMOC, which I've talked about here a little bit. This reduces the productivity of commercial fisheries that many coastal communities in the southern hemisphere rely on for food and income. This is not too unusual in countries that don't have, say, a strong industrial base, that they or a strong manufacturing base, right? They rely on the resources of the world to feed themselves and maybe even to have an export product, and therefore cash, foreign cash, or to have tourists who bring foreign cash. Well, the changes in the ACC are going to disrupt the natural ecosystem of the waters surrounding these nations, because these are all nations surrounded by water. Argentina, coastal areas, South Africa, Australia is completely surrounded by water, so is New Zealand. Changes in the ACC's speed and position dictates weather in the southern mid-latitudes. A poleward shift has been linked to increased drought in Australia and parts of South America, as well as more intense and unpredictable storms. So you're heading to the south because you can't live in the temperate zones anymore. They're just too deadly. So you're going to head into the south, the southern hemisphere, because you think that these foreign nations are going to be more isolated, more receptive to wealth, and easier to control with money. Argentina may be real easy to control with money. Same thing with South Africa. New Zealand, Australia, maybe less so, but I could be completely wrong about that. And yet, all the time that you're thinking that's the place to escape to, things down there may be getting really bad. At the same time, people in the north may be making the decision to head south. They may be heading south into something that is also a crisis. Analyzing the specific challenges these southern havens face, beyond just temperature, agriculture viability, water scarcity, and infrastructure strain. So as people start to show up, setting aside that this is global heating, every place is going to get hotter. The shutdown of the ACC, the Arctic circumpolar circulation, Antarctic circumpolar circulation. Shutting down the ACC is going to impact these countries. Temperature is going to impact these countries. Changes in weather patterns will impact these countries. But apart from all that, 162 million people heading south into some combination of Argentina, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand is going to bring impacts. Cultural impacts. All that money flowing in is going to have impacts. It's just, if nothing else, it exacerbates the wealth inequalities in these areas. And of course, politics. The people escaping into Argentina from Germany, France, the UK, the US, they're going to bring their own set of problems with them, including intolerance of each other and of the people who are already there. We have seen this through colonialism. We know how colonialism works. These are mostly desert regions. These southern nations are mostly desert regions or low rainfall. The Atacama Desert is the driest non-polar region on Earth. That's a big part of Argentina. If you're going to settle there, and if you're going to bring 162 million people into these areas, then they're going to have land. And yet they're going to find that the land that's there is not necessarily hospitable. It's going to have to be changed. Southern mid-latitudes are dominated by westerly winds that bring high rainfall to southern Chile, southwestern South Africa, southern Australia, and to New Zealand. So some of these places are desert, but some of them get torrential rainfall. And both of those could swing either way. Argentina is approximately 15% of its land area arable in 2023, equating to over 42 million hectares. So they have a fair amount of arable land. Could they accommodate a doubling of their population? Maybe. Australia has approximately 4% of its total land area is considered arable, which is roughly 46 million hectares based on 2015 data. So it's almost the same amount, 46 million hectares as opposed to 42. That's 4% of the nation of Australia. Can they figure out their agriculture to support doubling the population? A lot of Australia is desert. And a certain amount of it, even today, is either burning or getting torrential rain, or sometimes both. In South Africa, estimates include a high potential for agricultural land use, with some data suggesting a very high percentage of land is considered suitable for cultivation. Up to 80% of the nation could be arable land. So even if South Africa is not desirable for other reasons, like it's attached to Africa and there's 1 million people living there who may be looking for relief from the heat, the fact that there's a lot of land for food production might make it completely viable. New Zealand arable land was around 616 hectares. New Zealand is a small island. It's very mountainous, has a lot of forests. Could you turn it into arable land for a doubling of the population? Maybe not. But New Zealand might still be attractive. It's close to Australia. And if Australia and New Zealand could work out some trade agreements, you could have a lot of wealthy elites living on the island fortress of New Zealand and simply buying the things they need, manufactured goods, consumer goods, and food from Australia or other nations nearby, including South Africa. Again, these are all in the south, and the elites will be fleeing to the south in the southern hemisphere. And when they get there, they may set up trade agreements that currently don't exist, so that places like New Zealand may be able to support a much higher population of wealthy people because they can buy the things they need. Now, I already mentioned that there's going to be social problems with all of these wealthy northern peoples showing up in these less developed, excepting maybe Australia, nations in the south. There's a potential for mass migration. Again, 162 million people would be doubling the populations of these 4 nations I've mentioned. And resource conflicts as people seek these perceived sanctuaries. So everyone's thinking the same thing. They haven't thought it all the way through. Like, how is this going to work? Will they receive me? Will they accept me? How good? What good will my money do? Are there foreign enclaves? Are there expatriates already there? Can I manipulate the government? Can I manipulate the industrial base? Can I get what I need? They're not thinking those questions. They may be just thinking, well, I can't stay where I am. France, Spain, Germany, the UK, whatever, Greece, Italy, it's turned into a basket case. It's hot. People are rioting. We've got problems with the infrastructure. The infrastructure is old. Now it's being undermined by these changes in the Earth system. I have to escape. I'm going to go to Argentina. And that's their thought. That's it. They connect a couple of dots, and they pack their bags. And they take their visa. And, of course, they got their checking account, and they just leave. And they end up in Argentina or South Africa or Australia, and they haven't thought it through. Moving 162 million people into these regions would be a project unlike anything humanity has ever attempted. 162 million people. And they would all make this decision at the same time. And they would all move into these places pretty much at the same time. And we've never seen anything like this in human history. We have no experience with this. The regions that they would be flowing into to escape heating in their home countries, there's no precedence for this. Nothing of the kind. Moving 1 million people a year among the 4 nations I've mentioned, moving 1 million people a year would take 162 years. How many people could you move into Argentina annually? Let's say you could move 1 million people successfully annually. This would be a tremendous imposition. This would be amazingly difficult to move 1 million people a year into all of Argentina, South Africa, and Australia. Let's leave tiny New Zealand out of it for now. That's 3 million people annually into these nations. These nations would probably just completely fall apart if you had to find food, clothing, shelter, electricity, water treatment, sewer treatment, hospitals, schools. These nations would just implode if they each had to accept 1 million people a year. Even with all the money, even with all the wealth, even with all the bribery, just bringing 1 million people into your country when your country isn't that big. Your country has 40 million people. Bringing in 1 million people, that would still take 1/3 of 162 years. So it would take at least 50 years to move 1 million people a year into the 3 countries that are most likely to accept 1 million people each. And it would still be a disaster. And it would still be a disaster every year for 50 years to accommodate what I'm projecting to be 162 million people total that need to escape global heating. This would be instantly, from year one, and enormously destabilizing for existing populations, existing infrastructure, existing political institutions, existing treaties, existing agriculture, everything. This would be 1 million people a year for 50 years would be absolutely destructive for these nations. And yet, that's what the elites are going to be thinking. Even now, they're thinking about escaping global heating. They're all having the same thought. No one is connecting the dots that this is going to be extremely destructive. This is going to be very unsettling. I'm just going to move to Argentina. I'm just going to move to Australia. It's not a big deal. I'm not worried about it. I got money. I have a visa and a passport. I'm just going to get on a jet, my private jet, for that matter. I'm going to get on my private jet, my friend's private jet. I'm going to fly to Australia. I'm going to fly to Argentina. I'm going to get off the jet and be welcomed. And if I'm not welcomed, I'll just hand around money until I'm welcomed. And they haven't thought through any of this. Where are you going to live? Who's going to build your home? Out of what? What are they going to build it out of? And if the entire population has already filled all the habitable parts of this country you're going into, where are you going to go? And how big of a project is that to terraform a desert, to cut down an entire forest and turn it into agricultural land and places that are suitable for human habitation? No one's thinking these thoughts. They're just thinking about running away. That's all they can do. That's as far as they can get. There are implications for this. Would need to anticipate massive dislocations of existing populations. Remember, these are these people who are already there are not the wealthy elites. The wealthy elites are coming in 1 million a year for 50 years. They're just going to evict people from their homes. They're going to kick the farmers off their land. They're going to take over. They're going to bring in tractors, and they're going to bring in construction crews, and they're going to build high rises and condos and airport runways, and they're just going to destroy everything because they've got the money and they have the need. My guess here is that everything that you need to survive, food, clothing, shelter, water, all of it will become 10 times more expensive just because of the demand and the disruption. Political and economic resentment would be a constant reality as you try to escape into these places in the South. Racial, religious, and economic differences would be challenging to manage, to say the least. Challenging to manage. Risk of sanctuary countries becoming elite enclaves. An elite enclave would be basically you wall off the country. You wall it off even against the existing population. People don't get to live in the places that they want to live. They don't get to have the food that they used to eat. Somebody else is getting that because they've got the money. It would be an elite enclave. The cities would empty of indigenous peoples and would fill with wealthy people who jack up the price of everything. And even if you were not evicted from your home, eventually the price of your home would be so enormous that you couldn't afford to live there. You couldn't afford to rent it. Your fields, you couldn't afford to till your own fields because it's too expensive to get the tractors and the fuel, and only the elites can do this. Infrastructure and societal preparedness levels in these southern regions for absorbing significant new populations and environmental stressors. Okay, they're not ready. But these millions of elites are going to show up anyway. Doubling of populations with climate immigrants will create the need for hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars in infrastructure build-out and upgrades, water treatment, electricity, housing, schools, hospitals, freeways, malls, manufacturing, light manufacturing and heavy, solar farms, wind farms, nuclear power plants, trillions of dollars in infrastructure development just to make these places suitable for the wealthy elites in the millions. Who pays for this? Who collects the funds to do this work? When the work has to be done, who does it? Who builds it? Where do the resources come from? If you're going to build high rises, you have to have concrete and steel. Where does that concrete come from? Where does the steel come from? Does the footprint exist to manufacture all these things? In situ, on site. Do you have forests to cut down to turn into lumber? If you don't, then where does the lumber come from? Whose forest are you going to cut down to come up with the lumber to build all the residential housing that the elites are going to want? And they're going to want big houses, 8-bedroom houses with 7 bathrooms and a pool and a vineyard and an olive orchard. They're going to want all these things because that's what they left behind. They're going to want malls. They're going to want theaters. They're going to want ports full of sailboats and luxury craft, and they want to want all these things. Where do these resources come from? Who's building it? Where's the money come from? Who organizes these projects for these millions of elites who are coming with their billions and trillions of dollars? As a practical matter, even though on the long scale it would take 162 years to do this without completely destroying the host countries, we don't have 162 years. We have maybe 10 or 20. We are now on glide path for these people having to escape. They have the money. They have the foresight. They know what's happening. They are not in denial. They know everything. They know all about the science reports. And if they don't know the science reports, they can have someone like me to come to their house or their country club and lecture them about the challenges that they face. And they can walk away, pay me my $10,000 speaking fee. They can walk away knowing what they have to do easily. No one else will know. No one else has $10,000 to hire me to speak to them about the challenges they face. Now here I am giving you a free video. See how generous I am? Can you act on this? Well, maybe not. But if you're Elon Musk and you run across my video and you read it and you watch it and you have the notes right here on the screen, then maybe you decide, yep, I have to do something about this. It all happens at once. It doesn't take 162 years. They don't have 162 years. They have 10 years, 20 max. Preparedness for this influx of refugees, wealthy people, but refugees all the same, is probably out of the question. The actual number of refugees would likely be no more than 10 or 20 million. So even though doubling the populations of these countries is kind of what I'm talking about doing, the fact is that since there can be no preparation ahead of time, these countries won't be able to accept the 162 million, doubling their populations. That is probably what the elites would like. Maybe 10 million elites end up going to Argentina, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. And that's the elite of the elites of the elites. The wealthy of the wealthy. The hidden captains of industry and rulers of the world. 10 million or so. And in my estimation, I've mentioned this before on this channel, now you'll understand where I'm coming from. My best guess is that in the event of catastrophic global heating, which I don't think is avoidable now, and I'm not the only one saying that, by the way, no more than 8 million people survive it. That's a failure rate, death, whatever you want to call it, of 999 people out of 1,000. 8 million humans end up surviving it. And there will probably be 8 million people surviving with maximum amount of money and influence and resources in some combination of Argentina, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. Because I don't think they can do it in the north. I don't think there's anywhere to escape to in the north. If you're one of the elites and you're watching this video, I'm telling you how it is. You're going to have to escape to the south. And I don't think more than 10 million of you are going to do that. The rest of you are going to have to tough it out where you are because you don't have time. Argentina, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, they aren't going to be able to accommodate all the people who want to escape global heating in the north. They'll be able to accommodate somebody, and basically the early bird gets the worm in this case. And that brings up the final topic. I don't think, even if you're wealthy, and even if you're a billionaire, and even if you're made out of money, and even if you think that you can do this, I don't think these are sanctuaries. They're attractive. They have been colonies in the past. They probably would welcome Europeans in the future, especially if they have money. But I don't think it's going to work. Even after I've given all this presentation, I'm not sure it's going to work. Global warming is a global problem, and no region is truly isolated or immune in the long term. Think about that. If we're going into hothouse Earth, then we're going into hothouse Earth, and it's going to affect everybody. We may not know exactly who gets affected the most or first, but that's the problem. That is the challenge. It's global heating, folks, and it is global. It's right there in the name. Sanctuary regions, I'm talking here specifically about Argentina, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. Yeah, there might be others, but those are the four that come to mind. Sanctuary regions would eventually become overpopulated and resources overwhelmed. I don't see how that's avoidable. Everybody's going to want in. And the only criteria to get in is money. Not intelligence, not willingness to work with people, not tolerance, money. There is no sure way to know which areas in the South, if any, are immune to threats from global heating. It's a crapshoot, folks. We've already seen that changes in the ACC, the Antarctic circumpolar circulation, are impacting the southern nations already, just like changes in the AMOC in the north are due to affect parts of the US and the UK and Northern Europe. So these changes in circulation patterns are really critical. They help determine the weather. We're seeing this in California right now. We're having a marine heat wave right off the coast of California. That's why there's so much snow being dumped in the Sierra Nevadas. It's from the marine heat wave. That's where the water's coming from. So it's hard to know what's going to happen, except that something's going to happen. We can guess that. There's no sure way to know which areas in the South, if any, are immune to threats from global heating. There may be other reasons to pick these places, but don't assume they're immune to threats from global and impacts from global heating. The initial threats won't be the lasting threats. So is it better to just adapt in place? And this is a consideration. I don't know if the global elites are going to do that, but this is a recommendation for everyone. If you think that global heating is going to make your region hot, well, it will. But there may be other things, and the heat may come in early, but then you may have additional problems or even worse problems with torrential rain. We're seeing this in California. You may have additional and worse problems with climate refugees. You may have additional and worse problems with crop failure. So yeah, you'll have heat, you'll have torrential rain, you'll have refugees, and then you won't have any food to eat. And it's hard to know what order these things happen and how soon they happen. But they will happen. All these things will happen, and more that I can't even think of. Other things that wouldn't even occur to me, even as much as I think about this, they just wouldn't occur to me. But they will happen. In the fullness of time, given the inevitability of this taking place, these things will happen. Some areas might offer a temporary reprieve, but ultimate solutions require global cooperation and drastic emissions reductions, and the emissions in question here are CO2 emissions from the burning of fossil fuels. Yeah, you may need to escape to Argentina. You may need to escape to South Africa. You're still going to have to stop burning fossil fuels. Now, if most people are going to die because they can't escape, then that reduces emissions. It does. That is a quote-unquote solution. Is it a good one? For some people, it's probably perfectly acceptable. Finding oneself at the literal end of the world means there are fewer options for further retreat. So the original problem remains. If you go to the furthest tip of South America, if you go to the furthest tip of Africa, you're at the end of the road, literally. That's where the sidewalk ends. Where do you go from there? And the example of this actually comes from biology. There are species that live on mountains, and they live, say, at the snow line. This is a typical example, by the way. They live at the snow line, where below the snow line is too warm for them. It's the wrong type of trees, and so they live right at the snow line. Well, as global heating lifts the snow line on the mountaintop, they live further and further up the mountain. Now, there's less oxygen up there. There's maybe other problems. Maybe there's nothing to eat, but that they don't have a choice. They have to move with the snow line. And then eventually, the snow line gets all the way to the tip of the mountain. And what's at the tip of the mountain? The atmosphere, space. And then they go extinct. There's nowhere else to go. So if you choose to go live in Argentina, and the global heating just keeps chasing you, and you live further and further south in Argentina trying to escape the heat, closer and closer to the South Pole, eventually you're living in the sea. Because you've already chosen to live at the tip of the world, in this case in the south. Moving people to higher latitudes does not avoid problems with sea level rise. Yes, sea level rise is global. So if you're living in Argentina or Australia, or maybe even New Zealand, it's highly mountainous, but there are low areas in New Zealand, you will have coastal flooding. And of course, the coasts are where the cities are, because that's where the ports are. So you have your ports of call, you built your city around the port, you built the city where the water rushes into the sea, and you're taking fish from the sea and other products, and they're coming into the port, and that's where the people are, that's where the tourists want to be, and you've built your whole country, and now the millions of climate refugees, wealthy, influential climate refugees, are coming to your country, and they're going to move into these cities that are coastal. And then the coastal cities flood because of sea level rise, which cannot be stopped. These areas are not fortress solutions. Island nations have some natural defenses, but wealthy people will certainly find a way around that. So New Zealand is an island, and you'd think, oh, well, they can limit how many people can live here, right? It's a small island. They have a lot of mountains. It's probably not that great of food production. Maybe you could create more arable land with a lot of work and a lot of effort and a lot of money. But ultimately, New Zealand is small, and they're going to have to limit people. But wealthy people find their way around that. They just do what they want to do. And so if you try to limit your population to something seems sensible, pretty soon, because people have billions of dollars to throw at politicians, they're getting in anyway. And you may be overrun, just completely overrun. Your country may be overrun in a way that makes your country not even viable as a country. It's too many people, requiring too many things, and having too much money to get the things. This is highly disruptive. Lots of wealthy people showing up in your neighborhood, throwing money around to get all the things they think they deserve, is extremely disruptive. Politically, economically, everything. You would think islands would have less of a problem with that. So what are we talking about here? New Zealand, Australia. Given that South Africa is at the tip of Africa, it's somewhat isolated from the rest of Africa, so it's kind of an island environment. Argentina, same story, way at the south of the continent, kind of isolated. But their natural defenses don't solve the problem, because we're talking about wealthy people with money pouring in by the millions, trying to escape global heating. Someone who makes the wrong move into the global south might not have enough resources to move again. Let's say you choose New Zealand, but something bad happens there. They run out of food, and they can't buy food from Australia because the Australians won't sell them food. But you've moved to New Zealand, and so you've built your mansion. You've completely reestablished yourself. You've bribed the government to let you in. You've bribed the government to give you all this land. You've built all the land up. You built your own farm, and you have your own. And now all of a sudden, there's not enough food. Now all of a sudden the government wants your food. If you have an orchard or you have a vineyard, now all of a sudden the government wants more money from you because they have to buy food from Russia and China and America. But now you've invested in New Zealand, so you may not have a chance to move again. All in. You're all in. And unless you have a lot of money, you can't do that twice. None of this takes into account likely global conflicts or nuclear wars over resources. So as things start to heat up, literally and figuratively, the global security situation may simply go in the toilet. Go in the toilet, and there may be no way to escape that. Especially if you're living in, say, Argentina, and there's a lot of people living in Argentina, so having to import food, and you're importing food from, say, Brazil, but then Brazil becomes destabilized, and you're importing food from America, but America is having a shit show, authoritarian regimes and internal refugees and climate disasters, and pretty soon you're just swept up in the global conflicts. And if there's nuclear wars and there's one nation invading the other, then the collapse of food resources and manufacturing. Maybe you don't have manufacturing in New Zealand or Argentina. You get all your stuff from China, like everybody else does. But then China goes to war with Taiwan, and then there's a nuclear exchange, and then China's manufacturing goes offline. And now all of a sudden, you not having your own manufacturing base is a big liability. Not because anyone attacked Argentina or South Africa, but because those countries didn't have their complete autonomous solutions locally. They just use their money to solve their problems. And if there's global conflict, your money may not solve that problem for you. The best hope might still be collective action to mitigate climate change rather than relying on the fleeting hope of a southern sanctuary. I want to make that point. People don't think very hard about their problem, and especially if they have money. They think money solves all problems. And money solves certain problems. If you need a liver transplant, money can solve that problem for you. It may not solve this problem. No one's going to think about that because they're not used to thinking about problems that don't have solutions, especially problems that don't lend themselves to financial solutions. You may have to adapt in place. Now, I just wrote a book. It was 100 days of people adapting in place. I mean, they don't have a lot of money. They're just people like me and you and whatever, the neighborhood, right? They adapt in place, and that's a deliberate decision. They don't get in their car and run and try and go live in the woods and live in the countryside. They just adapt in place. And that might be the only solution for people, including the ultra-wealthy. Don't count on finding a solution in the global south or the global north or anywhere else. You may have to adapt in place. That's a different problem than just getting on your private jet and flying to Argentina and getting off at the airport with a suitcase full of cash. That sounds like an easy solution, but that may not solve your problem. You may bring problems with you that then erupt as soon as you get out of the airport with your suitcase full of cash, and people see you with a suitcase full of cash and you look like a wealthy European, and now you have a personal problem, right? You may be better off adapting in place. There are lots of ways to escape global heating by adapting in place. It's in the book. Domed cities, living underground, sounds terrible, but if you had to do it, you would do it, right? And of course, Elon Musk and his people are going to go live on Mars. Is that a solution? I don't know. Sounds like a dumb one to me. But hey, what do I know? Good luck, I guess. An immediate halt to fossil fuel consumption is almost certainly necessary. I don't see any way around that. We're going to get enough harm from existing levels of greenhouse gas in the atmosphere that probably many places on Earth simply become uninhabitable. We have to stop burning fossil fuels absolutely now. Will we? What do you think? The difficult problem is how to save people who have fewer options to relocate. That's my proposition. There are 8,000 million humans on Earth. My fear is that 999 out of 1,000 of them will perish, will be allowed to perish, and may be forced to perish, so that the 1 in 1,000 can inherit the earth. That's my concern. Maybe no one else cares about that. That's fine. I can't solve people's ethical problems. But the question will come up, if we're going to stay in place, do we even try to save people who can't leave? Why would we try to save people? Why would we not try to save them? Who decides who gets to emigrate? Who decides who gets to immigrate? It could be that the UK doesn't want people leaving and taking their money with them, and they stop you from doing that. They cancel your visa. Is that ethical? Well, if they need you to stay there to solve the problem in the UK or the problem in France or the problem in Italy, if they need you to just stay in place and solve the problems that we all share, then they might try to stop you from leaving. Leaving may not be an option. It may be considered unethical, immoral, and treasonous to take your money and run. That's a possibility. What are the ethics of flight from the mess we made? Because here I'm talking about the developed North. The people in the rich North who are trying to flee global heating, the mess they made. Is that okay? What if someone decides it's not? Then heading south to Argentina and South Africa and New Zealand may not be on the table. You may be forced to adapt in place. You may be forced to figure it out. You're so smart. You're so wealthy. You're staying here. And if you're wealthy and you're thinking you're going to flee to Argentina, maybe you should really examine that decision. Maybe do it now while you can get away with it. Maybe not do it later when there may be limits on where you can go and how you're going to get out. The ethics of saving people in place and creating resilience and adaptation strategies for everyone is on the table. I've been talking here about the elites, all their money, all their influence, all their power, all their choices, doing what they want to do. But is that how we're going to do this? Or are we just going to let the 0.1% take all their marbles and leave the stage? Take all the toys and leave. Take all the money and go where they want to go with it and start over again. Are we going to let them do that? Are they going to be allowed to do that? Is that the ethical thing to do? No, the elites, of course, have their own set of ethics. And there are certain things they just don't care about. They don't give a shit. They're the 1 in 1,000 who are guaranteed to make it, thereby condemning the other 999 to some kind of demise or life in abject misery. And these are not the ethical angle of global heating and what the wealthy are going to do, or what all of us are going to do, or how and when we're going to do it. There is no discussion of this to speak of. There's a lot of sciencey discussion about what is the heating level, what is the parts per million of CO2, who's doing the worst emissions, who has the most nuclear power. There's a lot of talk of comparative analysis and engineering speak and how we're going to save ourselves and all these magical solutions that they're proposing. But what about the ethics of just adapting in place and not running away and solving the problem and solving it for everybody? Solving it for yourself, but also solving it for your neighbors and your fellow country people, men and women and children that live in the place that you live, where you made a mess with global heating. I'm throwing it out there. I know the wealthy don't care. I know the wealthy don't listen. They don't give a shit. Anything I have to say, but it has to be said that flight of the wealthy may not be the answer. Simple as that. So that's what I've got. We can go back to I had some images here. I didn't bother putting them up because really the text was the most important thing. So there you go. Are you going to run away? Can you? If you lived, in your country and you're worried about global heating and you see the elites running away, taking all their money, taking all their toys and leaving, how are you going to feel about that? Will you approach your government and say, no, no, they can't. No, they can't run away and leave the rest of us here to go down with the ship just because there's not enough lifeboats. They can't take all their money and all their wealth and all their political influence and just run. What are we going to say? What are we going to tell our governments when the elites try to leave the Northern Hemisphere and head south? So that's what I've got. Again, this is scripted, right? I did a scripted thing. So give me some warm fuzzies. Like the video, subscribe, especially if you like this kind of content. I'll be doing more of these things in the future. And I'll be doing more of my normal thing, ranting and raging extempore without a script. So if you like that and you prefer that over this kind of thing, then you know where to go and you know what to do. My novel, It Was 100 Days, is linked in the description. And eventually I will be linking maybe to a Kickstarter for my new novel, titled Ariadne, a thriller, a techno thriller incorporating artificial intelligence and global heating. And if you think those two don't intersect, watch out, because they do. Speculative fiction, but I need to get it done because in 18 months it'll be a documentary, folks. 2 years, it'll be a documentary. Because that's my life. Can't get ahead of this stuff. I'm always a year behind. But at least I'm working on it, right? So there you go. If you were wealthy and you were thinking you were going to head to New Zealand, think again, folks. Think again. You're going to leave one kind of shit show just to walk into another one. Good luck. And wherever you are and however you jump in the coming crisis, my recommendation is always the same. Don't die.